Chris and Show, we got another excellent guest for you. It's an expert, David Steinman, best-selling author and leader in the anti-toxins movement. His powerful new book, Raising Healthy Kids, I'm gonna buy it. One of America's premier environmental activists, shows how today's most popular items, from bubble bath to cereal to cleaning products to snack food, are contaminated with unacceptable levels of chemical toxins and pesticides. He proposes alternatives and substitutes to keep your family safe. My gosh. I'm actually like, I've gone down this rabbit hole, not from the kids angle, just from the adults, but wow, David. I mean, I didn't even know where to start with this kind of interview.
Well, um, why don't ask me a question?
I guess that would be a logical way to start. What got you into this stuff?
So, I grew up in California in Los Angeles County and fished all of my life in the Santa Monica Bay.
Hmm.
And I would catch rockfish, calico bass, bonito, barracuda, yellowtail. And we brought it home and ate it and fed it to my family. I mean, I fished once or twice a week. I worked on fishing boats. Later, I became an investigative reporter, and I was working as on the environmental beat for the Los Angeles Weekly newspaper. And while I was there, dead dolphins washed up on the beaches of Orange County, and their blubber was filled with a chemical called PCB, or polychlorinated biphenyl, and that causes cancer and reproductive harm. And it's probably having an effect on the dolphins too, no doubt, and they're washing up on shore. Well, instead of focusing on the dolphins, I put together a study for the LA Weekly with a doctor, toxicologist, a marine biologist, and myself to measure the amount of DDT and PCBs in the blood of fishermen and women eating the locally caught fish from the Santa Monica Bay and nearby waters. And we did a survey and then actually drew their blood and had it measured for DDT and PCBs. And these were all strangers. Believe it or not, we got about 40 people to participate and give us their blood. I'm a really good salesman. And we said you'd get $500 worth of lab work done for free. And if you let us draw your blood, and we actually did report back to them the levels. It was so disturbing. You know, one person we drew blood from, he was a Japanese American man, former postal worker, and he had a bucket full of white croakers. And he had such high levels of DDT, and he was dying of liver cancer. You know,
Hmm.
it was so direct what we were seeing. As it turned out, what happened is Montrose Chemical Company manufactured DDT in South Central Los Angeles, and they barged their DDT tainted waste sludge into the Catalina Channel, hacked open the barrels, and dumped it into the ocean, about 2,000 tons, and contaminated the entire ecosystem where I fished.
Hmm.
The state water board allowed it. And so I fished for decades, and nobody ever told me or thousands and thousands of other people. And these chemicals were building up in our bodies, and we found really high levels in the people eating the most locally caught fish. So I testified at a congressional hearing. The Santa Monica Bay became designated as a Superfund site. A group called Heal the Bay was formed at the same time to oversee its cleanup. And that's how the bay got cleaned up. And that's how I got involved in all of
Wow.
this. My own blood had really high levels. I measured my own blood because I'd been eating the fish. And I had really high levels. And I didn't want to have those high levels because I understood better than anybody that that meant that I would have an increased risk for cancer or maybe not have as healthy children as I wanted.
They
So
didn't
that's
tell
when I
us any
had
of
to
this
become
stuff.
really aware of, well, what can I do in my own life to reduce my exposures? And that's what I put it into my first book, Diet for a Poison Planet. And then I take all of everything I've learned ever since and put it into raising healthy kids.
Diet for Poison Planet. I gotta check that one out too. I'm gonna look that one up right now. I grew up in Santa Monica, David. I remember Heal the Bay. I went
Yeah.
to Lighthouse Christian School, kindergarten to eighth grade. Then I went to St. Monica's high school. And then we moved to Orange County after that. But I grew up like age of 4 through 15 in Santa Monica. So, and I think I was even fishing at some points off the pier and uh surfing, boogie boarding, all that stuff with, and this was in the early 90s.
Oh, of course, there was a um I fished off that pier too in the party boats. I remember the Indiana was one of my favorite party boats that would fish off the pier.
Yeah,
Um,
between there and Venice, that's all that was like my neighborhood, man. I was just
yeah,
all over the place. That's where I
and
grew up. I just thought the whole world was like gonna be like Santa Monica and Venice.
but the we deserve to know that the fish were that poisoned,
And they
and that
still
they
are
should
that
have never been
poison.
poisoned in the first place.
But the
That's
thing is, David, between then and now, nothing's really changed, no?
Well, it's gotten worse and worse and
It's
worse
getting
because we have
worse.
other
And all
engineers.
these nonprofits out there, but what are they actually doing? Because it's getting worse, not better.
There's a macabre way of looking at that, well, saying, well, it's bad now, but think how bad it could be.
Oh my
It could be a
gosh.
lot worse. Think if we hadn't banned DDT, or think if we didn't put regulations on benzene and chemicals, it
Wow.
would be a lot worse. And it's bad now. We're really fighting a tough fight, but it's a manageable one in your personal life, and it's a manageable one for this country if we start to adopt one principle: zero tolerance.
And zero tolerance for what? And then I wanted to ask you something right after that, but zero
So
tolerance for what?
I'll give you an example. I've been down in Cancer Alley, Louisiana. Cancer Alley is the river parishes downriver from Baton Rouge and upriver from New Orleans, and that's where there's hundreds of chemical plants all combined together, spewing chemical toxins into the river water and into the air.
Hmm.
The people there are being told, well, a little bit of atrazine, a little bit of phthalate, a little bit of benzene, a little bit of vinyl chloride. None of that will hurt you. It's okay if you're pregnant and drinking the water. It's just a really low level. And that's what public officials have been telling the public for decades. And that's why we have these, uh, that's why, for example, the river parishes of Louisiana have such high cancer rates. Low levels are not safe. The only safe level is zero tolerance. And the public has to just start to say, zero tolerance for toxic chemicals in our foods and beverages. No, not a little bit. Now, whether that happens legislatively, it should, but I can tell you, you can have zero tolerance in your own life, and raising healthy kids shows you how to be anti-toxic in your own life and really cut down on your exposure to the chemical toxins that harm your kids and yourself as a parent.
So just to give a little context to everything we're discussing here. So from read this just now from DDT's been illegal in the United States since 1972. And the Santa Monica issue, the dumping in the Santa Monica area, that occurred in the 50s. So these toxins remain in the water for, you said it's worse now, right? So A, how's it getting worse? And B, these obviously just don't go away, right? It's been what, 70 years?
Well, yeah, on the DDT, the dumping has continued through the 1980s, actually,
How did it continue if it was illegal since 1972 in the United States?
because through a loophole in the law, Montrose Chemical was allowed to continue to manufacture the chemical for I think another decade
Wow.
for export.
Wow. Okay.
You
So
see what they do to us?
yeah, selling it to other
See how it
countries.
really works?
Yeah, selling it to other countries. Hey, we're not selling in the United
And then
States.
what did they leave us? A Superfund site.
Yeah, right.
You
Very
know,
nice.
that's it happened in, it happens in Cancer Alley, but it happened in New York in Hoosick Falls. My friend Michael Hickey, he lost his father early in life, right after he retired from the St. Gobain plastics plant, because he was working with toxic chemicals, and the chemicals were in the water, and no one in the town wanted to know. Michael had to do his own testing to save himself in the town because people were getting testicular cancer, kids were getting kidney disease and suffering immune dysfunction, and the women were having a difficult time carrying pregnancies to completion. And it was because of all these chemicals in the water the town didn't want to know about.
Mhm.
You know, there are no grown-ups out there. You have to be the grown-up. You have to be antitoxic, you
So
know?
how can, well, my next question was if you had a magic wand to change, let's say one thing, just one thing about toxins in our kids' exposure to it, what would it be?
Oh, eliminate it.
But like which one?
One.
Which one? Like you can only pick one.
Oh,
Which one would you
one
pick?
toxin?
Yeah. Or like just limit or completely eradicate one exposure to something in kids. Which one would it
Yeah,
be?
I think the really big one right now is phthalate.
Wow.
That's because, you know, people are trying to cut down on just for the audience to understand. You know, everyone is trying to be anti-plastic, which is good. Like I'm trying to buy everything in glass now and really avoid plastic. And I'm trying to be much more conscientious about not throwing things out and reusing them. And
Me too.
but phthalate comes from the word phthalic acid. Phthalic acid is the starting material for plastic too. So think of phthalates as little microplastics. What they are is they're added to fragrances and cosmetics to make them a little more pliable so that they're not just, you know, like water, but they have a texture and a feel. They can fix fragrances into the product too, but they're loose. The phthalates eventually float into the atmosphere or absorbed into the skin. And we've discovered products, for example, and I talk about this in the book. Um, we've discovered products that even say they don't contain phthalates, that contain them. Really big companies that are selling baby products. And these affect neurodevelopment. In Korea, they find they not only cause an increased risk for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder in the kids who are born to the moms with the highest levels and as they continue their exposure after birth, but the same kids with the ADHD also have less working cortical brain tissue. In other words, the phthalates have literally interfered with the development of their brain like plastic would. So these kids are being handicapped. Well, we have a ubiquitous exposure now to that, and we're not even being told about it. My group is in litigations. You know, we have over probably 40 legal cases going on right now as a nonprofit in California and Washington, D.C., particularly for undisclosed contaminants. And some of them involve phthalates because uh, when kids are exposed to this during pregnancy and mom doesn't even know she's being exposed, as I said, they will lose cognitive abilities, they will develop more ADHD, their behavior will be altered, it can become somewhat feminized, and this is all from in utero exposure, just being exposed during pregnancy, and then it continues through childhood, and we wonder why Americans aren't reproducing.
Hmm.
You know, these are the reasons why we're plasticizing our kids. So I would pick phthalates as the number one ingredient
Phthalates.
that really needs to be out of the supply.
And the
You know,
what's the one biggest action everyone could take watching or listening right now to reduce or eliminate their exposure to phthalates? Or maybe top three.
well, it would be to buy organic cosmetics and personal care products and avoid those with fragrances.
Wow.
And um, organics are far less likely to contain phthalates. You can't always get organic cosmetic and personal care products, so you need to. I go through a lot of the tips in avoiding phthalates in the book,
Mm,
um, and I point out there's a lot of safe brands. We've tested a lot too,
mm.
but avoiding fragrance is a big thing because phthalates are usually associated with fragrances. Just to give you an example, my kids came home one time when they were teenagers. My son came home with English leather cologne. I don't know if you've ever heard of English leather
Oh
cologne,
yeah.
but
Yeah,
I think every teenage boy has worn it.
yeah.
It was loaded with phthalates, dibutyl and phthalate, really toxic stuff to the testes, the sperm. My daughter brought home canoe. It was loaded with phthalate. So, but they're not disclosed. So avoiding fragrance is a big deal. Yeah, avoid it.
Do you Yeah, people are watching, listening. They're gonna say, "Yeah, David, but I don't want to stink, man. I walk around all day smelling like crap, dude."
Yeah. Well, you can find fragrances that are made with essential oils. They don't last as long, but they are much safer to use.
Venice Beach
And
used to have some good spots
also,
for
let me kind of give you a little larger perspective on this,
that.
okay? Because you're kind of making it a this or that situation, and I
Hmm.
get that you may have your favorite fragrance, maybe it's Chanel or whoever, whatever brand you adore as a male or as a person.
Hmm.
Um, what my book, Raising Healthy Kids, is about is getting the most significant reductions of total chemical exposure, toxic chemical exposure, without having to be perfect. So, you may not be perfect with your fragrance. You may not avoid that exposure. But on the other hand, you may buy like organic shaving cream and organic shampoo and organic conditioner and a makeup without fragrance. So that when you do use the fragrance, at least you're minimizing your exposure because you've been aware and you're making that choice. The problem now is that people are using these products and they don't have a choice because they're not being informed.
Right.
Nobody's going to be perfect though. And I'm not going to shame people for not being perfect because I'm the farthest from it and I would be such a hypocrite. So I'm not going to do that. I'm trying to get people to do big reductions in their life. And most of your cosmetics, and if you intervene for your child, your teenager, and I show you how to do that as I did it with my own teens, they'll be into it. They'll say, that's really cool that you want us to use organic cosmetics. You won't be perfect. They won't be perfect. They're still going to go to the body shop, but you're going to get a big reduction out of it.
How so phthalates, they're a relatively new or recent invention, more or less, like the last century, would you say?
Since the 20s.
Since the 20s.
Yeah, they're made from distilling petrochemicals.
So we
Every petro.
have
Yeah.
we have like a century, basically. We're all in a clinical trial of about 100 years. And in that period of time, we don't want to say it's a causality, but certainly correlated. Increase in incidences in cancer, metabolic conditions, gender dysmorphia, and other things. Do you think there's something related here, like from your personal opinion, or does the science support this?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's a really interesting topic, isn't it?
Yeah, but don't people like, haven't you been called like a conspiracy theorist or a lunatic for talking like this? The problem, David, is people trust the regulators to do the right thing for us. But what I've come to understand is the regulators are not actually looking out for our best interest. They're looking out for the best interest of who captured them, which is private industry. It's specifically the private industry that have gotten large and created a revolving door system for consulting opportunities for these regulators that are supposed to keep us safe. So, but most people don't understand that, and they think, okay, well, FDA says this is safe, this is safe. What are your thoughts on this?
I've told you that the biggest myth we have is that low level is safe for you. We have to go for zero tolerance. And I think most regulators are governed by not by so much public health policy as a health policy that weighs economic damage with health and kind of makes trade-offs. And that's
Mm.
where we are as a citizenry. If you're asking me how these our exposure to what are called xenoestrogens or endocrine disrupting chemicals is impacting our neurobiology. You know, I tell a story in Raising Healthy Kids about Lake Apopka in Florida.
Mm.
I don't know if you're familiar. Have you heard of Lake Apopka and what happened there with?
It's in this book, Mercury. Mercury,
Oh,
right?
it's actually probably what has to do with estrogen and DDT
DDT. Okay. Okay.
and dicofol. So there was a DDT manufacturing, a dicofol man. So here's another little thing about the DDT. The way DDT, we keep getting exposed, is DDT was banned, but dicofol wasn't banned. And dicofol is about 20% DDT. And it continued to be manufactured in the United States, in Florida and Lake Apopka for decades after DDT was banned.
Mm.
That's another way we get it. And it was being used on our raisin crop. So raisins, I buy organic raisins, folks. But anyway, the poor gators of Lake Apopka, what happened is there were some significant spills from the dicofol manufacturing plant called Tower Chemical on Lake Apopka, and these spills resulted in contaminating the entire lake with DDT, the contaminant, and dicofol. And the gators were turning into, well, they didn't have definite male or female characteristics anymore. The males had really small penises. The females had many undeveloped eggs. In many cases, none of the eggs would hatch. Whereas all around Lake Apopka, gator eggs were hatching at about 80 to 90%, 90% rate. At Lake Apopka, about 80% weren't hatching, some really high number. So these gators were kind of they were really ferocious on the outside, but within they were in gender chaos. Now, to say that's not happening now to our kids would just be denying what's obvious, because, the truth is, we've been evolving in terms of gender identity and sexuality with our environment ever since we've been around. Our environment has always influenced our gender identity and sexuality. The novel thing about the last 100 years, when you were mentioning phthalates in the beginning of the chemical revolution, is that only in the last 100 years have we introduced tens of thousands of endocrine disrupting chemicals into the environment that our kids are now interacting with. And that's a whole new wild card that we're identifying. So if you're asking me if these chemicals affect us on a widespread national basis besides a family basis, the answer is yes. It's obvious. You
So
can
you
look at
think this
societal
is,
trends and see it.
I know you have a chapter in your book somewhat related to this, but are you saying that DDT and the other estrogen generators uh are responsible for or have something to do with the greater movement that's undeniable across our planet of gender fluidity and whatnot?
Well, there is a trend toward femininity because these are estrogenic chemicals and they interfere with the body's production. And when we measure testosterone levels in young men today, they're not nearly what they used to be
Rock
in the
bottom.
adult men.
Yeah.
And young men are having difficulty reproducing all throughout the United States and many industrialized nations. So they are influencing everyone in different ways. There are so many different combinations, and each of us is so unique. There are trends, but there are so many sub-trends. We don't know them all. So some child may be impacted not by gender behavior, but just may have learning difficulties. Another child may develop breast cancer when she's older. A boy may not be able to reproduce or have a family because his sperm is damaged. It's affecting everyone. What happens in the media is when folks use gender identity as a cudgel, as if it's bad to be something other than male or female. So there's an inexorable biological pull now that you're describing that's causing a change in all of our neurobiology, that's making us realize we are a mosaic. We are not a polarity when it comes to gender identity. And that's just being made more obvious by the last 100 years of chemical exposures. And now we're seeing the impact in our offspring, because the offspring born after 1945, they don't have any virgin genetics anymore. They've been totally impacted by the petrochemical revolution. and their genes have been modified. So yeah, there are big changes going on uh, in our neurobiology that are impacting all of us.
Would
And yeah,
would DDT be a phthalate, or is that a different?
well, DDT is an organochlorine pesticide, but it acts like estrogen in the human body.
I got you.
Phthalates can act like estrogen, or they can interfere with the body's production of testosterone. What happens is these chemicals kind of imitate estrogen, and they can interact with the cell receptors on our reproductive organs. So instead of a natural estrogen or testosterone interlocking with the cell receptor, these synthetic ones do. And that's when they cause genetic mayhem and start changing the gears and the levers of our genes, so that we sometimes start producing way too much toxic estrogen instead of a benign form of estrogen, or instead of producing testosterone, we produce more testosterone.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So
So
DDT is more similar to atrazine.
Yeah,
in that.
atrazine is an herbicide, and DDT is a pesticide
Okay,
that kills
gotcha.
insects. Atrazine kills weeds.
Gotcha.
so just to reiterate what you had said previously, and what I hear you saying is gender going back, say, 150 years ago, it was binary. But with the introduction of these chemicals, that's just no longer the case.
We have altered our genetics now. We can't go back.
We can't go back. So even if we were to, let's say, wave our magic wand, get rid of all these hormone disruptors and wait a few generations, you think it's permanent now? It's here.
I think if we did that, there'd be a lot of healing and there'd be a lot of improvement. But what I'm saying is, I think that our brains have already now been wired um, to a more of a gender understanding of what gender fluidity is. You know, most of us were really brainwashed by the Don Draper's Mad Men fame, you know, in the 1960s, that you had to be this testosterone-driven CEO, and
Good
that it
show.
was
Good
raw.
show.
You know, we could bomb them into submission, right?
Yeah.
What I am worried about, though, when I say we can't go back, is I think we're also making a lot of people dumber in society and making it more dysfunctional. I think that's really dangerous, because these chemicals like phthalates do cause cognitive loss. And when you
Right.
do it over a national basis, that's a lot of IQ points the nation is losing. We can't afford to lose these kids. We really
That,
can't.
and then when you combine that with dopamine surges of social media, especially things like TikTok, uh, you're just pouring gasoline on the fire, I
So,
think.
yeah, because if kids' brains are damaged, they can't think through, oh, this is TikTok, but I have a set of values. I understand this. I can see the larger picture. Instead, they're because their brains have been damaged by neurotoxins, they short circuit. They don't think they can't think. You know, the biggest thing I know from having gone to school and being a dad is you got to teach your kids to think. But
Yeah.
kids have to have the ability to think. If their brains are damaged, they're not going to be able to think things through. And you're right, TikTok, Instagram, look at all the messages they're getting that they have to make sense of. You have to be smarter than ever as a kid to be normal, you know, just to be happy.
So these phthalates and other disruptors, they're not found, I would assume, in underdeveloped areas. So this is not a problem there, correct?
I don't know about studies when you say underdeveloped.
Right, where they're not, where there's no industry, they're not creating these chemicals, they're not utilizing these chemicals or working with them. They're not found in the soil or in the water.
But
There's
wherever
no
you buy consumer products, they're there.
No.
So no matter where you are in the world, say you're buying Ivory dish soap. Excuse me, I'm not going to mention a brand. Don't I because you know I know I can't, because we do tests, so we know which ones do and don't. But I haven't tested Ivory. But
Sure.
suppose you're buying a dish soap, you know, or you're buying a fragrance as a. No matter where you live in the world, you want to use fragrances. Everyone does. So no matter basically no matter what continent, you're going to be exposed to phthalates through your consumer products.
It's
But
everywhere
it's
in the
worse in
world.
America. It's worse in America because Europe has regulations uh, that somewhat regulate toxic chemicals in cosmetics. In the United States, the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act has less than 2 pages devoted to personal care and cosmetic products, and there is no pre-market safety testing required. So, as I said, we're finding phthalates even in products that say they don't contain them.
Because no one's holding them responsible, or
Only
there's no
people like me,
consequence.
citizen enforcers, who do the
Wow.
testing.
So these
Yeah.
guys are scared of you, David, or do you know
You
these
know
guys
what?
on a first name basis?
We work with a great counsel, and we really work hard on the legal cases. We try to get public benefit, but I'm telling you, when you're taking on big companies like Hormel, Chicken of the Sea, Bumblebee, as we have,
Hmm.
you've plotted out that war long before you take the first shot. We know
Wow.
exactly what's going to happen. We know, like when we were taking on the shellfish industry, we knew their import records. We knew where they were getting their shellfish from in the Bohai Bay near North Korea and South Korea. We knew exactly where the shellfish were coming from. We knew why they were polluted because of the pollution coming into the Bohai Bay from the Yellow River. We knew what kind of smelters were along the Yellow River. We knew where there were nuclear plants. We knew the whole pollution pattern. So, these companies, we've nailed them when we start. You have to. They're too big not to take really seriously. And we do take them very seriously. And what they're doing is egregious. Some of these shellfish companies like Bumblebee have 400, 500, 600 parts per billion lead in their products and cadmium. So at the height of the Flint, Michigan lead crisis over the last few years, a really bad glass of drinking water in Flint would have 10 to 20 parts per billion lead. One serving of these had 600, 500 parts per billion.
Hmm.
That's the equivalent of about 20 glasses of drinking water in one serving. Imagine
Yeah.
if you're pregnant. Imagine if your wife were pregnant, you're saying, oh, here are 20 glasses of Flint, Michigan drinking water preserved from circa 2019, right at the height of the crisis. Dear, have 20 glasses. And let's do a salute to our baby. That's what's happening. And they weren't telling consumers till we came along.
And these were the ones Obama and Biden were saying, hey, it's good for you.
Bumblebee, Chicken of the Sea, Crown Prince, we made them all label their products in California.
I mean, this this would leave one speechless because there's no escape from this. I mean, you can buy the reverse osmosis water filter for your house. Um, what are steps you can do, especially like for kids? How do you give your kids water? You used to be able to drink out of the garden hose in the yard.
I know we were so naive, weren't we? I mean, we weren't very. Listen, I don't want to shame anyone. The whole environmental movement that we're talking about didn't begin until the 1960s when Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring. Before then, environmentalism was saving mountains and forests, preserving lakes, not building dams. That was environmentalism. Then suddenly Rachel Carson came around with words like acronyms like DDT and expressions like parts per million. And suddenly we had a whole new language. Without the vocabulary, how could we protect ourselves? How could we know? So here we are growing up in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and it's been 20 years of this movement. What's the vocabulary we have to even know how to protect ourselves? So we've had to develop the words and the concepts. So I don't want to shame anyone, but it's a manageable issue in our personal lives, and we have to be the adults and manage it as a nation and a globe because these same phthalates are this part of the same chemicals causing global boiling, right? These are the same chemicals increasing global warming. These are petrochemicals. So
Right.
we here on the demand end should really be curtailing our demand. I wrote Raising Healthy Kids to do that. And show people, especially moms and dads who are busy, here are these safe products. Here are the ways to get your biggest reductions. So, we talked about filtering your water. There are some basics that you have to do these days.
Right.
Filtering your water, organics, these are huge.
So
You
would you
you
say those
can't.
reverse osmosis water things are worth the investment?
Yes, and just for the audience to know, I don't know how Dan how much yours ran. They usually run, or they can run $300 to $500 if you have the budget. Say you had $500. Do
Yeah.
I test or do I filter? That's a no-brainer. You filter. Don't worry about the testing because it's going to be bad. Because even the chemicals that are supposed to be good, like the disinfectants that kill viruses and bacteria, end up forming what are called trihalomethanes, which are carcinogenic or cause cancer too. So even if your water is completely free from bacteria and viruses, which is good, it will have these residual compounds that you want to filter out. So if you have the choice, A, test, B, filter, B, filter.
Do you think in the future we're going to look back, let's say 3 decades from now, and look back at this time just like we look back now 3 decades ago? I remember when I was a little kid, they'd be smoking on airplanes. Everybody would be. Now we look back, we think that's so ridiculous. Like, how was this allowed? Do you think we're going to be looking the same way at like plastics and fragrances and the food we're eating?
I think if we don't change our ways in 3 decades, this earth is going to be so much hotter. We're going to be looking for shelter and air conditioning. And I think we'll continue to have higher rates of cancer. And what will happen is there will be folks who were smart and did everything they could to cut down toxic exposures. And they're going to have stronger genetics and genes. And there are going to be a lot of people who are going to pass on more damaged genes. So what's bad now will get worse.
Wow.
If you think society is dysfunctional now, it'll get worse. If you think we're not producing, when they studied, the gulls of what the West Coast after their DDT exposures, they found that since the gulls couldn't reproduce, the girl gulls were just hanging with the girls and the boy gulls were hanging with the boys. They didn't reproduce. They didn't have a need to be with each other. So we'll see changes in society like that. We can look at I tell the story of Lake Apopka. Our own gender identity and sexuality is as plastic as those gators was. It really is. And our children are showing it. So I hope when we look back, though, we can forestall it. Like we talked at the beginning, it could be, you think it's bad now. If we don't fight, think about how much worse it will get. So I'm a little bit happy about the fact that we have to fight or it's going to get much worse. So I'm optimistic that way, that we can slow the damage and keep this planet going for a while. I want to. We really have to educate people. It's like your show is educating people to be anti-toxic, not to be passive and just say, oh, I do this and that for the environment. No, be really assertive about it. Be anti-toxic and protect your kids,
Sponsored
yeah.
by Life Boost. Get some bifidobacteria in your coffee, folks. Chris, you've been pondering a lot. What's on your mind?
I'm just listening. Interesting information. I don't disagree necessarily with the causality of chemicals and being introduced into our environment. I'm not sure that for certain it's causing all the gender problems, but certainly there's statistical means to point out that we have higher rates of estrogen and lower rates of testosterone. So that's undeniable. And I guess that would make sense that it would lead to the gender issues.
They used to blame fast food, but this looks like it's like more pinpointed properly. Crosshairs seem to be aimed
There's
at
a
the
lot,
phthalates now.
there's a lot of influences on gender identity, and gender identity is a very complicated thing, and how we express ourselves to the world versus how we think of ourselves internally, how we dress, You know, there's so many things. What I emphasize in the joy of gender in raising healthy kids is that the problem isn't the gender fluidity. That's very cool and what we are. The problem is people who are intolerant and don't understand that the brain and the genitalia are both the body's sex organs, but they don't develop at the same time. So during pregnancy, the developing fetus has this initial burst of sex hormone that makes the genitalia develop. But then weeks later, it's the brain that needs the sex hormones. But what if in the ensuing weeks, mom has been using a lot of fragrance or something with phthalates? And so instead of getting that big burst of testosterone that the boy brain needs to develop into a boy brain, that testosterone burst is inhibited. And these things happen at the parts per trillion level.
Wow.
So the brain becomes a little more feminized. Okay, that happens in all of us. But what I'm saying is when people don't understand the true nature of gender identity and how it develops, and that the genitalia don't define gender, but the brain does, then there's no problem with gender fluidity or any of that. The problem is with society not acknowledging what's real and what's science. So,
Well,
you know,
well, so to
that's
disagree with that, so the problem, at least in my opinion, arises when you're conflating gender with sex. These are two entirely different things. And there's a lot of that happening.
I agree. They're completely different. In you know, you may be uh, uh, you may be born and identified as a boy, transition to female, and then want to have sex with females. You know,
But this
or
theory
you
of
may want to have sex with both or one. I mean, it's a very complicated issue, but I don't think what I try to emphasize is don't judge it. Just with your kids, just go with it. You know, it's when you try to, I really believe you need to be supportive 100,000%, because these are very powerful forces in them. And if a child is identifying in a certain way, you'll know if it's a fad or if it's real by the repetition of the behavior, you know. But don't judge them by it. Let them
but
teach you.
but
Kids don't, yeah.
the toxins and the pregnancy, this is a very interesting hypothesis. Have there been studies done on this?
Oh yeah, yeah. This in the Netherlands, the Swedish Royal Academy, excuse me, in the Netherlands Brain Institute has done lots of autopsies on transgender
Wow.
um, persons. Some who've gone through replacement therapy, some who haven't. But what they find is that there are certain areas of the brain in the transgender person who's gone from male to female um, that are very similar uh, to a female brain, not because of the hormones themselves, but they were just born a little different. The terrain of their brain is a little different. There are certain areas in the brain that are different in the female, and these are the same in, but in men who are homosexual, those areas are the same in all males.
Let's see.
You know, so there are things going on in the brain. It's like territory they're just starting to chart, like the moon. But yeah, we do know that this was presented as a theory, but I think it's now accepted scientific fact in the informed uh, medical community that the genitalia and the brain both depend on sex hormones to develop, and that those periods of influence are at different times, and consequently the brain may develop slightly differently than the genitalia and vice versa,
That makes
which is
sense.
why it isn't the genitalia that define gender identity. It's just that's just a science fallacy. It
It
just
makes
is.
sense. It makes sense. It's just I mean, logically, it makes sense if you introduce exogenous disruptors to what natural occurring hormones, you're going to get ratios that are out of whack
Yeah,
with what
exactly.
they're supposed to be.
It's just a wild card. Everything gets skewed. We get more cancers too. I mean, these are the things we should be concerned about: is the cancers and the loss of IQ. The gender fluidity is just kind of, you know,
The only
that's
thing
not a big
doesn't
issue
make
to me.
sense, and maybe I don't understand hormones enough, but the females, So if they get it, because they get extra estrogen also, right? Like they're drinking the same water from the pregnant mom that she's drinking, whether it's a boy or a girl. And then the girls that come out and identify as male, right? I don't know if that's possible with, or I don't know if that's enough to explain like because of increased estrogen. But certainly it makes sense for the other way around.
Well, I think most scientists believe that gender identity is predetermined by birth. By the time the child is born, their gender identity is going to
Mm,
happen. And they base this on animal studies and just looking at the behaviors of kids at
yeah,
animals at very early ages.
yeah,
Um, that's why they say certain kinds of therapies don't work. If you're trying to change your child, you can't really change the way a tree is going to grow. You really can't change the way your child is going to grow.
right.
So,
Um, yeah.
so what would you say is the chemical causing, as Dan pointed out there, the the female who's being exposed to additional
Estrogen.
estrogen
Yeah.
should still be female, right? So it's not like they're being exposed to high levels of testosterone, which is what you would assume if at birth gender is already determined. So what are they being exposed to that's causing this female to perceive themselves as a male?
Um, well, I think that's been less well studied because there are less female to male who have transitioned. So it's difficult for me to give you a specific answer. Like it's almost like can we add this chemical here and do this here and produce this? There are so many different phthalates and chemicals that we're being exposed to, and everybody is so different that while we see some trends, um, I would not want to provide an answer. And I don't think we should make it that chemical exposures are determinative either. It's like they're impacting all of us in different ways. So, um, you know, some of these chemicals, the body makes testosterone, by the way, from estrogen.
Mhm.
So if you're altering a woman's production of estrogen with these endocrine disruptors, maybe she's going to start producing more testosterone. It's quite
Yeah.
possible. There are different pathways that estrogen goes down to whether it becomes a very benign form of estrogen like estrone, or becomes very powerful like estradiol, or gets metabolized through enzymes into testosterone. Maybe the endocrine disruptors increase the amount of aromatase or other enzymes that cause the estrogen to be converted into testosterone. But we also know that women can become hyperfeminized. And also, in girls exposed to some of these EDCs or endocrine disrupting chemicals, we know there are risk for endometrial, uterine, and breast cancer increases.
That for
So
sure.
the impacts may not be, mirror identical, but both sexes definitely will suffer them from those kind of in utero and early life exposures.
Fair
Mhm.
enough. And there's more toxins out there than just phthalates and hormone disruptors. Wow. What about shampoos, sunscreens? Um, does your book also get into like diet sodas and things like that? Like pregnant women drinking Diet Coke? I mean, is it FDA approved as safe, or did they actually recommend against that?
Yeah, the FDA does not have any has not had any guidelines against Diet Coke in pregnancy.
You get the
But
green light.
yeah, it's not a you know, I really hope the folks reading my book have enough sense not to know that Diet Coke is just bad for you,
They
no
don't.
matter how you do it.
They
And that
don't.
doesn't mean you should never drink it, but don't drink it during pregnancy. And we do go through the additives in diet drinks. But yeah, shampoos, personal care products, we go through those. I share how to look at any product and tell if it's safe or not. I even tell a story about all these hairdressers who couldn't have babies because they were suffering miscarriages and everything. And then they all lost their business during the pandemic and they had to stop using the product so much. And there's a big baby boom among hairdressers when they stopped using their
Hmm.
these particular cosmetic products that were loaded with various kinds of toxic compounds. I tell that story in the book. So
You're talking
you
about
can, but
makeup
you can
or
manage it all. It's just I'm just trying to, I'm trying like we're doing here is having a conversation, and it just says, look, these are the things these are really healthy things for your kids. You notice the effects right away too. That's the important thing. You don't have to wait months or years to show that's getting your kids on a healthier diet with organic foods and giving them some safer cosmetics and personal care products to use and using safer household cleaning products, that your kids are going to be brighter, you're going to feel healthier right away. Your RNA sends those messages to your DNA, and it picks up when you're doing these things that are reparative for your body.
well, this show's clearly not sponsored by Sephora.
Oh, we'd love
We'll
to
be
measure
open
the
to it though.
phthalates and the shop workers there.
Well, I mean, we'll be open to it. What about, is that an opportunity? So like,
You should, yeah, I bet the shop workers in Sephora, we should do a fertility study,
oh my gosh.
you know?
First of all, they'd be offended. Like, all I am is a baby factory to you or David, or can I not be a individual? Be ready for that, man. David,
Oh, it's serious. You know, the fragrance stores, the women who work in fragrance shops do have much higher levels of phthalates.
that's
The studies have
crazy,
shown
man.
that.
That
Yeah.
is crazy.
Well, you're sniffing them all day.
Can you name, well, not name, but what are some of the biggest culprits? Like, is it the powder? Is it the lotions? Is it you said you're sniffing them all day, so it's perfumes?
So definitely products that list fragrance on their labels you want to avoid.
Fucking no more fragrance, ladies or
And
guys. Just walk around
um,
smelling all day.
and then again with your personal care and cosmetics, try to get ones with as many organic ingredients as possible. They
Mm.
won't be perfect, but they give you a much bigger reduction. And I've looked at the monitor, for organic foods, I've looked at the monitoring reports, for example. And organic foods are much lower in chemical exposures than conventionally grown. So and organic cosmetics are not perfect, but they're going to be a lot safer and healthier.
There should be like a incubator, Dave. I don't know if you have the resources to pull this off, but there should be an incubator for, what would it be called? Hormone forward cosmetic companies. Think about your hormones. Think about your estrogen before you spray this on, or think about, like, we don't see enough alternatives, I think.
You know, um, the Safe Cosmetics campaign has done a really wonderful database on safe cosmetics for women of color and persons with curly and kinky hair. People are really becoming aware of this,
Mm.
and women are seeking it. And thanks to all the consumers in the past who have demanded these products, the choices are really there for men and women to buy safer cosmetics. So I would say to anyone listening, it's really quite simple. It's not going to cost you more money. It's really just taking the time to educate yourself. The result is it's your best health policy. It's your best health insurance policy.
Yeah, people need to be educated. Chris, there's good news. You can buy better hair products now.
Oh, yeah.
He's making fun of me. I see. Soon it'll be bars of soap. I'll just choose the lard kind.
I use a soap, Dr. Something's body soap. It's like completely toxin free. I forgot the name.
Oh,
Gosh,
Dr. Hauschka?
no,
Dr.
another one. Gosh, I'm not prepared for to promote this, but if you guys are watching, we're happy to have sponsors. Um, yeah, fragrance free, toxin free soap. Dr. Something. It's like a blue bar of soap, and it's very simple fragrance-free soap.
Well, a lot of people tell me when they're detoxing, they really do try to go off as many plastics as possible, including not buying cosmetics, trying to
Detox
avoid.
from all that shit. Dr.
Yeah.
Bronner's. Dr. Bronner.
Oh, Dr. Bronner's is great. I recommend them.
I do
I
too.
recommend them.
Sponsorships, we are open. We are
They are
considering.
antitoxic.
It's
They
hilarious.
are warriors. They're liquid soap. You can use it in cleaning products. You can use it with your baby
Yes.
if you want to
Yes.
reduce your toxic exposures. And I don't get any funding from them or anything, but
But we should.
it's a company we've tested and rated, and
Yeah, we need to. We need
they're
to get them
they're very good.
sponsored.
I
Excellent.
recommend them.
Highly recommend to. Wash the
Yeah,
face, wash the hair, everything with
really
this.
simple, but it's effective.
Yes.
You don't need, as some teenagers were telling me from Salinas, California, who are telling me about the cultural things we have about being clean. You don't need to smell like Fabuloso to be clean.
But you gotta admit, Fabuloso, loaded with phthalates, but smells good as hell.
Oh, but you don't need to, it's that, there are cultures where, if the home don't smell like Fabuloso, it ain't clean.
I know,
And
yeah.
and they're
Our
toxic
office
on
where we work,
you.
the doctor's office where we work.
It's like they want you to smell these quaternary compounds and fragrances and stuff.
Yes.
It's like they're leaving their scent. Yeah, we did our work, but now you're kind of poisoning us too.
Or what about spraying the room with Lysol? Is Lysol safe?
So Lysol contains quaternary compounds,
Shit.
and the quat compounds are the same things used in hair products for persons with curly hair, and they are very powerful disinfectants.
Oh,
So I don't think you need to use them. I think it's overkill, and I wouldn't use them as my first choice. But because you brought up Lysol, I can't help but mention that you'll also find what's used in Lysol in many hair products. They're called quaternary compounds. And I tell a story about reproductive problems and how to get over them from those exposures in cosmetics.
oh,
So
fuck.
I'd rather have my quaternary compounds in Lysol than in my hair products.
Wow. What about Clorox wipes?
Bleach, just
Oh,
bleach.
yeah. So bleach actually is better than the wipes because the wipes contain the quaternary. Ever since the pandemic,
Fucking
everyone
hey.
is loading everything up with quaternium compounds because they kill everything. The problem is they kill everything.
They kill your
So we're
microbiome, probably.
overdosing on them, and women are getting fertility issues from being exposed to too many quat
What we should
compounds.
do
So
is like while you're spraying or while you're mopping with Fabuloso, like drink a kombucha so that while you're killing your microbiome, you're replenishing it at the same time. So when
Yeah,
you're done, it's like a
that'll
net
work.
zero.
That
Yeah,
that'll work.
yeah,
I don't think it works that way.
maybe just ditch the Fabuloso.
Sponsored by Sephora and
Yeah,
Fabuloso.
just a little apple cider vinegar and a little rubbing alcohol will clean quite well. That's
Damn.
awesome.
Who cleans your house?
I have two border collies, three kids. Are you asking me who cleans
Yeah, who
it?
cleans all that?
The tails of the border collies.
Me. I am the only one who cleans it, and I can't keep up with it.
So you
But
use apple cider vinegar to clean after them?
um, I do use that, and I also use a really safe line of cleaning products called Ecos, which
Hmm.
we've tested. You can get them at the store, and again, that's for cutting down exposures.
Gotcha.
But yeah, Dad does the cleaning. Dad does the cleaning.
Wow. Big
Nice.
ups to you. Big props. Chris, I know you get questions, man. You want to like do an audit of
I
your cabinet right now, or what do you want to do?
no, I mean,
We got a game, but
it,
go ahead and say your piece, man.
no, I don't have any peace. It's an interesting conversation.
To say the
Lots of
least, we can do 12 hours on this.
lots of things I was not aware of. I think I might buy the book, David, just so I'm aware of the things that are safe to use and are not safe to use. I'm thinking right guard right now. I've been using that for
Oh, dude.
40 years.
Dr. Hoffman, rest in peace. Bless his soul. He told us he was an oncologist, David, in the Bronx. He passed away after COVID, but he told us every night, he said, well, no matter what you do at the end of the day, wash your armpits really well. because he knew we're messing around with like those deodorants you're not supposed to.
I don't recall that, but I'm sure you're
I
right.
do.
So
Yeah.
here's what's in Right Guard. Fragrance, which we talked about.
Not Chris.
Um,
Damn me.
hydrofluorocarbon 152A. We talk about the forever chemicals,
Hmm.
and those are made from fluoro-based molecules. So hydrofluorocarbons sound a little bit ominous to me. I don't know enough about them to give you a definitive answer, but I think you might want to make a change.
Well,
Yeah.
is there
I mean,
any
it's up to you. It's personal.
sure. Is there any over the counter at your local drugstore deodorant that would be safe to use?
Tom.
So there are a lot of brands. Uh, First of all, if you're using the spray Right Guard, you shouldn't do that because the sprays, and I'm not accusing Right Guard, but the sprays tend to have a little benzene in them. So you don't want to be using sprays, the aerosol spray Right Guards,
Hmm.
because you could be spraying benzene. I'm not saying Right Guard has it, but about
Most
half the
likely they
sprays
do.
does. So I would just seek some products like Arm& and Hammer Essentials is a bit safer.
Hmm.
Tom's of Maine is a safer product. They make these deodorant stones that are safer. There are a lot of much safer brands than Right Guard. Um, but again, that's kind of like finding the right body chemistry. And I know everyone wants to be pleasing to their partners and society. So I think that's something where you might have to experiment with. Like, I actually found that I had to use two different kinds of natural deodorants for it to work right for me. One didn't work as well, but I didn't want to use some of the more synthetic ones. So I really did have to experiment.
You can just like throw some coconut oil in there, organic coconut oil, and call it a day.
Yeah, well, it was actually the response of my partner. It's like,
Ah.
oh, really? Oh, okay. Thank you. Next time we'll do better.
Yeah,
Better combination.
yeah, I'd be kicked out of bed if I didn't wear deodorant.
Well, you're supposed to
So
wash your armpits at night, though,
yeah,
Chris.
yeah, exactly. And
Well, I mean, you scared all of us now, and thank you for that. Uh,
oh, I didn't want to scare you, but I want to make it motivate you.
no, but
Thank
fear is
you.
the best motivator
Yeah,
on the planet.
yeah. It's
So
very manageable to really cut down your toxics, and so many great things happen in your life and other people's lives. Like we started talking about Cancer Alley, right? And
yeah,
been talking about phthalates. So the people there are drinking water with phthalates.
Hmm.
People here on the left coast, we're using baby products with phthalates. We have to cut out our demand to help our neighbors down in Cancer Alley, Louisiana. When we stop using so many phthalates, their drinking water is going to be safer too, because we'll be cutting the demand. So that's how I say we may be doing something personally, but we're truly having global effects.
That's awesome. So I don't know what happened to Dan there, but um, I was going to ask Dan if he wanted to play our game. We have a game that we do with some hosts, but we lost him there.
nah, I'm here. I mean, I leave for like 5 seconds. Chris, it's your show, man. What are you supposed to do, man? If
No,
I'm
it's
not
our
here for
show.
5 seconds.
Our show.
Dr. Joe
Well,
couldn't join. He apologizes. He was giving me a phone call, and
got it.
I answered. But
So
sure,
you want
Chris, that's come on, man. I'm
you
ready.
want to do
What do
the
you want?
game? You have about 5-10 more minutes, David.
Oh yeah, of course. Let's do it.
Okay, all right.
All right, all
I
right.
like
I
So
David.
think.
so when Dan and I started this channel, we initially started it as a music reaction channel. Um, so what we do now, we don't really react to music any longer unless we do one of these podcasts. And
It's a
we
great
have the
Trojan horse, David. Music
yes,
draws, but then we want to implant and impregnate these ideas, from your brain into them using music as the Trojan horse.
Got it.
so what we'd like you to do is pick out a song shorter one if you'd like, but it can be long as well. Pick out a song you like. I'm going to go ahead and play it and react to it.
One you like that you think we haven't heard.
Oh my God, are you serious?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we can't just be talking about phthalates all day. We got to give these people like what they want. Didn't we just talk about dopamine hits and we've got to catch these young generations. They're
Well,
still of childbearing potential.
since we've been talking about Mississippi and Mississippi River and Cancer Alley, how about Catfish Blues?
Never heard?
Catfish Blues.
Sounds interesting. Let's put
It
it
does
on.
sound interesting.
Catfish Blues. This sounds interesting as fuck. Let's see.
I wish I was a catfish. Waiting down in the sea.
Really?
Have all you pretty women fishing for me.
Catfish
I went
Blues,
down to my
1941.
girlfriend's house, sat down on the steps. She said, "Come on in, Muddy Waters. My husband just left."
David knows the lyrics by heart.
We don't need the song anymore. Thanks, Dave. Is it Robert Petaway? Petway?
And who sang that song?
1941. Yeah, Catfish Blues.
Muddy Waters. Muddy Waters. Big Mississippi.
Muddy Waters is the name of the group.
That's
Oh.
the man, Muddy Waters.
Gotcha.
One of
Gotcha,
very
gotcha,
famous,
gotcha.
a very famous blues man who played
Wow.
the Mississippi River Circuit, but all
Okay,
was in
okay. I
Chicago.
found one of them alive. So let's let the ad work its way through. We're being polluted constantly, not just in our environment, but in our brains with corporatism. And these are the same ones funding the studies, which is scientism. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I've never listened to Muddy Waters. Should have, just from the articles I read for music that I prefer. Yeah, it was definitely a treat.
This has been fun. This has been great.
Yeah,
Great.
we really appreciate having you on, David. Lots of interesting information.
Oh, I know. We'll have to have we'll do this again. It's like a party. We'll bring some organic popcorn,
There
free
you
of
go.
It's a
fluorocarbons.
phthalate-free party. Ain't no
Um,
party like a phthalate-free party, because a phthalate-free party don't stop.
we'll do it again, and I'll bring some products and stuff.
Oh,
We'll
that'd
do
be
some
cool.
education.
And we'll have
Yeah, that'd
Dr.
be
Joe
cool.
on because Dr. Joe is having a New Year's Eve party, and he would definitely resonate well with you.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, look at this book he made me read. I haven't read it yet. Making me read.
Let's say, can't read
See,
it.
yeah.
Aspartame disease, an ignored epidemic. Look at this, man. Like 1,000
Yeah.
pages of
Yeah.
let's
Have fun
open
with
it
that.
up. Case 9G23. A woman was diagnosed as fibromyalgia, stated she had such severe pain I could barely make it to work. Insights from eosinophilia, malignant syndrome, the hazards of ingesting single amino acids with or without neurotoxic contaminants or underscore. I mean, this is insane. This is what Dr. Joe making me read. So,
That's pleasurable reading for him, hey?
and probably for David.
Yeah, I'm really telling people stories.
Yeah.
You know, every story in Raising Healthy Kids is just you and me talking. It's just
You
people
know what?
talking.
Your next book's gotta be like, would you ever do something like huge like this and like just story case study by case study by case like this guy just did about aspartame, but you do it for like phthalates and all this stuff? That would be insane. That would be like the encyclopedia of case stories on this. Oh my gosh. But I'm buying the one on the kids too, because honestly, we need to know what's important and when we need to stay away from. Just the little tidbits you provided us here is enough to get started. But guys, you need to educate yourselves, man. And go
Absolutely.
follow
Brain juice,
David.
well.
Where can
Yeah,
they follow
brain
Dave?
juice.
Where can you follow you, David? Or should we
So,
just put link to the book?
I'm on Instagram, David Steinman _ author. David Steinman _ author.
Oh, I'm gonna follow
I'm
you right
on
now.
X, formerly known as Twitter, by David Steinman. And my
Whatever.
website is davidwilliamsteinman.com. And you can
Oh,
buy Raising Healthy Kids advanced copies at amazon.com. Just enter Raising Healthy Kids and my name, David Steinman. And the book will come up. You can order your copy.
By David
Awesome.
Steinman. I got you here, man. Okay. Buy
And
your
I'll-
advanced copy of Raising. Okay, wow. Thank you so much for coming on. Just
Yeah,
follow
absolutely.
it.
Thank you
We'll
very much.
do part
I'll-
2, part 3, and we'll have Dr. Joe on, and it'll be good.
This has been great, Chris and Dan. Looking
Thank you,
forward to
David.
next
Well,
time.
thank you for having
This
me
is
on.
great. Thank you,
Thanks.
guys.
And nice meeting you.
Yeah, this has been really fun. It's great talking to you. I hope everyone enjoys it as much as I have.
Likewise. Thank you, guys. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Bye-bye.